Welcome back to A Bottle of Oil and Honey. My name is Ashley, and in today's video, I wanted to share something that God has been speaking to me on and that I feel led to share with you all. And I want to go back, I think this was this past Thursday. It was early in the morning, and I was on my way into the office. I was in my kitchen at my sink, and the name Ahithophel just dropped randomly into my mind. And I knew that this was a biblical name and that there was some type of story behind the name, but I couldn't remember exactly what the context was. And I could recall as I'm standing at the sink that I think I listened to a Bible study on this guy a year or two ago. I'm figuring it's Old Testament, and I kind of just left it at that. I kind of brushed it aside, didn't think too much on it. Sometimes I just have random thoughts, but sometimes those thoughts aren't random. It's really the Holy Spirit speaking to you, so listen to those moments. But fast forward a few minutes, I get in my car and I leave for my garage, and not even in the first minute of me leaving, my car disconnects from my phone. So I have my phone connected to my car's Bluetooth so I can listen to my own music. I don't have to listen to radio. The thing is that my car's older, and so it probably needs a system update. So right now it's not uncommon for my phone to disconnect from my car. So it did happen within the first minute of me being in my car, and I have it set to a Christian radio station that I think it's nationwide, but they do have some local programming here in my city. But this sermon was preached by Alistair Begg, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Within the first 5 to 10 seconds of this sermon that I'm listening to, because my phone has disconnected from my car, he mentions the name Ahithophel. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is not a name that's commonly preached on. And so he had my ear immediately, because I want to hear what the context of the story is behind this name. And so it's coming out of 2 Samuel 16. And you learn that Ahithophel was actually a highly regarded counselor to King David during his reign. It's a really sensitive time in this period, and it's essentially looking like Israel may split into a civil war because David's son Absalom is trying to become the next king. And so Ahithophel, even though he's a highly regarded counselor in King David's court, he actually helps Absalom try to take over the kingdom by advising him to sleep with David's concubines. And so you have Ahithophel, who is a traitor essentially, and David is made aware of that in this chapter, 2 Samuel 16. And then you have another character, Hushai, who is another dear friend of David, who is pretending to be on Absalom's side, but he's actually truly loyal to King David. And I wanted to share it's 2 Samuel 16 verse 23, because Ahithophel is a really interesting character, and I'll get into a little bit more of his backstory and why I think he actually decided to defect and try to help Absalom. But in verse 23 it says, "Now the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one had inquired at the oracle of God. So was all the advice of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom." So again, highly regarded guy, and it's pretty disappointing and disheartening when David learns that this is the same person that he considered a friend. There's actually a psalm written by King David, Psalm 55, which some believe was actually written about the betrayal of Ahithophel. And I wanted to go ahead and read it. So verse 1, "Give ear to my prayer, O God, and do not hide yourself from my supplication. Attend to me and hear me. I am restless in my complaint and moan noisily, because of the voice of my enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked. For they bring down trouble upon me, and in wrath they hate me. My heart is severely pained within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fearfulness and trembling have come upon me, and horror has overwhelmed me. So I said, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. Indeed, I would wander far off and remain in the wilderness. I would hasten my escape from the windy storm and tempest. Destroy, O Lord, and divide their tongues, for I have seen violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go around it on its walls. Iniquity and trouble are also in the midst of it. Destruction is in its midst. Oppression and deceit do not depart from its streets. For it is not an enemy who reproaches me. Then I could bear it. nor is it one who hates me, who has exalted himself against me. Then I could hide from him. But it was you, a man my equal, my companion, and my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together and walked to the house of God in the throng. And so that's, you can just see his heart in this, how painful it was for someone that he was so close to just betray him in such a wicked way. And what's interesting is that when you look at the backstory of Ahithophel, you find out that when they're listing out all of David's mighty men, they list Eliam. And Eliam, in another area, you see that he's a son of Ahithophel. And in another area of scripture, and I'll jot all of this down somewhere in the video, but Eliam is actually the father of Bathsheba. So Ahithophel was essentially, many believe, the grandfather of Bathsheba. So you can see how he might have been bitter, held some hostility toward David. We know that a lot happened between him and Bathsheba, how he set up her husband Uriah to be killed in war because he had slept with her while they were both married, had a child with her. There's a whole backstory. And so I'm just like, okay, God, you didn't drop this name into my spirit just randomly. And then to hear it on the radio station. And then last night I was watching this movie called Pride and Prejudice, Atlanta. I love the movie Pride and Prejudice, but it's not anywhere streaming right now. So I happened across that. I've seen it before. It's a decent watch. I don't think it's technically a Christian movie, but there's some Christian themes. But there's the character Mr. Wickham and how he tells the family certain things they believe that's contrary to the truth. And so it just kind of reminded me of this. So really just a reminder to be careful of who you take guidance from. Just make sure you have the discernment to know what is truth and what is not. And just be careful who you have in your circle. I know it's a desire for many to have a huge circle of friends, but sometimes it's just best to have 1 to 2 close friends. And I think this chapter, I want to go back to this chapter overall, 2 Samuel 16, because it starts out talking about Mephibosheth, which is the son of Jonathan, who David had kind of taken in, because he had made an oath with Jonathan, because Jonathan was loyal to him in spite of being Saul's son. And so it starts off, David is having to wander the wilderness now, and Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, came up to David, and David's like, "Where's Mephibosheth?" And Ziba lies and tells him that Mephibosheth stayed, and basically trying to assert that he is essentially betraying David, which was not true, because you find out later on that Mephibosheth was actually mourning David's departure and just the entire situation. But David believed this word, unfortunately. So you have to give David a little grace, because he's in a really difficult position. He's probably lacking a lot of resources, and these are just the first words he's been given, and he believes it. But he really should have taken that to God and asked for the discernment to determine what is the truth, especially when you're in a high position like that. Anybody could just tell you anything. What I think is also really interesting is that people liken Ahithophel's role to the Old Testament or foreshadowing of Judas to Jesus, because Ahithophel, again, he betrays David. Not only that, he hangs himself just like Judas did after the betrayal was found out. You also see some other foreshadowings in this chapter, which is really interesting. There's this guy, Shimei, who curses David, and he was in the family of Saul, so I think he was a Benjamite as well. But he came out cursing David, even though he's the king, just disrespecting him, and David kind of just brushes it aside, and his mighty men are trying to defend him and saying, like, do you want us to do something about it? And David's like, no, God is letting him. In verse 11, he says, "Let him alone, let him curse, for so the Lord has ordered him." Now, I don't know if that's true. Highly doubt it. But again, David is in a really difficult position right now. And I think the biggest thing with this chapter is just the emphasis on the sovereignty on the hand of God, because all of this that's happening, so you have Ziba lying on Mephibosheth, and this guy Shimei cursing David, and then you have Ahithophel betraying David as well as his own son Absalom. But it all worked out in the end. David was able to retain his kingship, and then the kingship position then was handed to Solomon. And so it all worked together for the good of those who loved God. And yeah, just be careful who you get advice from and who you give an ear to, what you give an ear to. And I think that's all that I had for this quick little video. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.